there, everybody! I'm Swahali, creator of such classic Blockland videos like
Block Wars
and
Block Wars.
And of course, who could forget
Block Wars.
Recently, I received a message from user MouseDroids21 asking me to help him improve his machinima skills. I figured I'd take it one step further because it'd be easier just to show him rather than write it all out and tell him how. And then I realized more people could benefit from a tutorial like this, so I decided to make the video series we're watching now. So let's dive in as we learn how to make Blockland machinima! Part 1. A story. A story is integral to making any video of any kind enjoyable and fun. Even if you're telling a completely non-fiction event, we still want to have a basic story structure, otherwise it'll feel messy and incomplete. So, just what is a story? Well, we can break it down to its most simplistic elements. A beginning, a middle, and an end. I know that seems arbitrary, but you'd be surprised just how few people actually implement this method correctly. First, the beginning. A beginning, as its name implies, is the start of our story. And like anything, when we start something, we want to establish everything we're dealing with up front, so we as an audience don't get confused as the events unfold on screen. You should be able to answer the simple 5 W questions in your beginning. Who, what, when, where, and why. How to execute this is up to you, and there isn't really a set guide or rulebook on how to do this, but we'll talk about a few different methods. For example, you can introduce your characters in a variety of ways. They don't have to be complicated either. We just need to know who is who. We need to understand what they are doing, when and where it's happening, though the when isn't always necessary, especially if it's something arbitrary like today or present day. You can usually leave that part out. And we want to know why they're doing it. What sparked this conflict or adventure that they're on? For example, MouseDroids mentioned Kitty0706 in his message. If you're familiar with his work, he liked to work primarily in Team Fortress 2. He was able to start his videos without really needing to answer some of these questions because he was relying on the already built-in story of TF2. We know in TF2 you play as one of the 9 classes, who have all had their personalities defined by Valve in the Meet the Team videos. We know that they are either on a red team or a blue team, and we know that usually a fight between the two of them will break out because that's what the game is about. In Blockland, we don't have as well-defined rules for characters as each person is unique, much like in real life. In that case, we need to establish a few traits, either quickly if the video is short or plot-driven, or over a period of time if the video is long or character-driven. You can actually think of this in the same way that TF2 does it, red versus blue. It's one of the oldest literary themes in history, us versus them. Start at the beginning and say, this is the red team, and this is the blue team, and then start adding stuff to them. For example, red team believes in equality for all of Blockland, while blue team believes in a fascist dictatorship. Boom! Conflict. And with conflict comes a story. You don't have to actually dress up each team in their colors. You just need to align them to a cause or an idea that we're going to understand is against our heroes. You don't even have to do this with words. Say your characters are fighting against the Nazis. Just put a few swastikas on the enemy's uniform or the enemy's base, and we can instantly understand what's happening. Symbols are a powerful tool, especially in a game like Blockland, so don't be afraid to experiment with them, so long as you remember the basic rules to tell the audience. Who, what, when, where, and why. You can do it in 5 minutes or 5 hours. It doesn't matter, so long as those questions are answered in some way. Second, we need to address the middle of the story. The middle of the story is the most important part of the story, as this is where all the things we see happen actually happen. For example, earlier I said perhaps you have your characters fighting Nazis. They were outside an enemy base with swastikas all over the walls. Well, now they're going to raid the base. The raiding of the base is the middle of the story. Now we see our characters performing the actions that were set up at the beginning. You can even save answering the why question until now. Maybe now we see the cruelty of the Nazis for the first time in the middle and understand why our heroes are doing what they're doing. It's the simplest part of the video. It's just making the things happen that you want to happen and then allowing them to continue to happen until the ending. The ending is obviously the conclusion to our story. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, it just has to be what stops it. Perhaps our heroes manage to stop all the Nazis and then they celebrate. It's the conclusion to all 5 W's. But here's where we've got to improve ourselves. We ask, was that an interesting story? Let's recap it. Heroes stand outside a Nazi base waiting to infiltrate. They raid the base, killing every Nazi they come across. And when they finally get inside, every Nazi is now dead. They have defeated all the Nazis and as such have taken over the base. The end. Technically that is a full story, but it's not exactly an interesting one. A story is kind of like having an objective given to you in a video game. The game will set you up with something to do, you go about doing it, and when you've met all of the requirements of the objective, you've completed it. But to make a story interesting, we have to add something to it. And this can be done in a number of ways. For example, maybe we see the story unfold through the eyes of the Nazi the whole time. Oh, except the story doesn't outright say they're Nazis at first. We hold on to all of the who questions until the end of the video, only revealing the outcome when the heroes win. This is what's known as a twist ending, and we've subverted the audience expectations up until this point. Or perhaps we add a moral. A moral to our story is a reason for the story, a lesson to be learned. Perhaps the end of the video we learn that it was through teamwork that our heroes were able to win against the enemy, and thus we should apply that to our own lives. Or maybe we can add what's called a character arc. A character arc is a lot like a moral, except it's learned by one of our characters in the story. Perhaps one of the heroes has a strong distaste for Nazis because he doesn't think of them as people, but in the end he realizes that most of the people who were killed were just grunts who were only following orders and were not even realizing what it was they were fighting for. He suddenly sees that they too are human like him and were only fighting for their country. He himself learns a lesson at the end of the story, thus completing his arc. There are numerous ways to tell an interesting story, and they don't even have to be original. Maybe you want to tell a story that's been told 1,000 times. That's fine. All you have to do is make sure you tell that story in your own way. These rules aren't even set in stone either. Perhaps if you're making a comedy video, the whole purpose of the video is just the joke. So you don't even have to have a story. The joke is your story. You only need to set up the who and the what of the joke, and the rest does itself. The most important thing to take away from this lesson is that you need to address the reasons why the audience should care about what's happening. Speaking directly to Mouse Droids now, you asked me to analyze one of your videos for feedback, Incident 010B. The major issues with this video is in terms of story, and we'll get to the rest of it later, are the things that aren't exactly clear. We see two people holding some Lego guy hostage. Who are these people? Why are they holding him hostage? What's important about him? And then another guy bursts in and starts going on a rampage. The rest of the video is a violent attack on wherever it is we are. The problem with this is that we go straight to the middle of the story. We see all of the carnage and mayhem this character creates without knowing why he's doing it. We might watch the video for its violence for the sake of violence, but we might not stick around for the ending. Let's take a quick look at the video that you're referencing, Crinkle's Madness series, Incident 010A. Crinkles is actually a great person to study for this example, so I'm really glad that we get to talk about him, because he manages to tell engaging stories without any dialogue at all. Let's break it down. We start with a faceless character. See, Crinkles is able to get away with this because in the context of his videos, it implies that everyone in this universe looks this way, so that there's nothing special about him not having a face, that's just who he is. He starts banging on a door. We know he's in need of help of some kind, because these knocks are very desperate. We see the interior of the building. 3 guys in suits and sunglasses holding big weapons approach. We now know that they are an authority of some kind as they're all wearing matching suits, a symbol of power that we can all recognize. They have their establishment boarded up and are trying to keep everyone out, also implying that they are very secretive and don't want anyone in. They look outside and now see that the threat the guy was running from, zombies. He's helpless and alone, so we sympathize with him. Suddenly, our hero, Hank, drops from the rooftops to defend the poor guy. We don't even need to know who he is, really, to know that he is the hero. He just did something to defend the poor fellow who we sympathize with. In our eyes, we now know that he's a good guy and that he is handy with his weaponry, traits we need to know for later. In just 20 seconds, Crinkles has already established our hero without saying anything. However, he then subverts our expectations by throwing that innocent person he just saved through the boarded window in order to break in. The guy isn't dead, though. Crinkles makes sure that we see that. We now know that Hank is an anti-hero. He's the good guy, but he's not afraid to do what needs to be done in order to win. The conflict is now a simple one. Hank is against the suits. They are an organized symbol of power who we know wouldn't even save the poor guy being chased by zombies. We know that they're bad guys and that Hank is the good guy, and we learned all of this without even seeing the rest of the Madness series. The rest of the video plays out much like a video game plot, and that's fine. That's the middle. The end of the video is Hank getting himself ripped in half while reciting an old trope. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. However, he doesn't get to finish it as it's another subversion of expectations to the audience and adds a bit of shock as well as dark humor. The man from the beginning takes out a cigarette and starts to smoke while saying, "Just another day," meaning this sort of thing happens all the time. And if we've seen other Madness videos, we know for a fact that that's exactly what happens. Hank being killed, despite being our hero, was a twist ending, thus making the whole thing much more interesting. In just over a minute, Crinkles was able to tell a complete story, including his signature brand of insane violence and gunplay, all without speaking an actual word. Mouse Droids, I see a lot of potential in your work, and I hope that you use this information to help craft better machinima. For the rest of you, stay tuned for part 2, where we discuss filming, the camera, how to get a great shot, and even visual storytelling. In the meantime, if you're an up-and-coming machinima maker yourself, and you'd like me to take a look at some of your work like I did for Mouse Droid here, feel free to contact me. There's no shame in asking for criticisms, and I'm not here to tear your work to shreds. We're here to learn and improve ourselves, not make others feel shitty. Until next time, I'm Swahali, and this is How to Make a Blockland Machinima!